Real estate words and terms with meanings and examples, part number 9. Estoppel certificate, which means a document confirming the terms of an existing lease and that no defaults exist. For example, the landlord requested an estoppel certificate from the tenant before selling the property. This means the landlord wanted written proof that the lease terms were being honored. Fair market value, which means the price a property would sell for on the open market under normal conditions. For instance, the appraiser determined the home's fair market value to be $350,000. This means that's the likely price buyers and sellers would agree upon. FHA loan, which means a government-backed mortgage insured by the Federal Housing Administration. For example, she used an FHA loan to buy her first home with a low down payment. This means the government helped insure the mortgage, making it easier for her to qualify. Fix and flip, which means a real estate investment strategy where a property is bought, renovated, and quickly resold. For instance, they bought a fixer-upper as a fix and flip project to earn quick profit. This means they plan to renovate and resell the home soon after buying it. Fixed-rate mortgage, which means a home loan with a constant interest rate for the entire term. For example, he chose a fixed-rate mortgage to avoid rising interest rates over time. This means his monthly payments will stay the same for the life of the loan. Fixture, which means an item that is permanently attached to the property. For instance, the chandelier was considered a fixture and included in the sale. This means it was legally part of the property and couldn't be removed. Flood zone, which means an area designated as having a risk of flooding. For example, the home was located in a flood zone and required special insurance. This means the property was in a high-risk area and needed flood coverage. For sale by owner, FSBO, which means a property being sold directly by the owner without a real estate agent. For instance, they decided to list their home as a FSBO to avoid paying commission fees. This means they handled the sale themselves instead of hiring an agent. Foreclosure, which means the legal process where a lender takes ownership of a property due to missed payments. For example, the house went into foreclosure after the owner stopped making mortgage payments. This means the lender reclaimed the property because the borrower defaulted. Franchise, which means a business model where individuals operate under the brand and system of an established company. For instance, she opened a real estate franchise under a national brokerage. This means she ran an office that used the brand and practices of a bigger company. Gross income multiplier, GIM, which means a ratio used to estimate property value by dividing the price by gross rental income. For example, the investor used a GIM of 10 to evaluate the apartment building. This means he divided the property price by the annual rent to get a quick estimate. Ground lease, which means a lease where a tenant rents the land but owns the building on it. For instance, the company signed a 99-year ground lease for the commercial site. This means they didn't buy the land but built and operated their business on it. Gross scheduled income, which means the total possible income from a property if fully rented and no losses occur. For example, the property's gross scheduled income was projected at $120,000 per year. This means that's the full rental income expected with 100% occupancy. HUD-1 settlement statement, which means a detailed breakdown of all closing costs in a real estate transaction used before October 2015. For instance, the buyer reviewed the HUD-1 statement before finalizing the deal. This means the buyer checked the itemized list of fees and costs at closing. Home equity line of credit, HELOC, which means a revolving line of credit secured by the equity in a home. For example, she used a HELOC to pay for renovations on her house. This means she borrowed against the value of her home and could draw funds as needed. Home inspection, which means a professional examination of a property's condition before purchase. For instance, the home inspection revealed a leak in the basement. This means a trained inspector found problems that could affect the sale. Homeowners Association, HOA, which means an organization that manages common areas and enforces rules in a residential community. For example, the HOA required approval for exterior paint colors. This means the community rules were managed by the association, including appearance standards. ILC, Independent Legal Counsel, which means a lawyer who represents only one party to avoid conflicts of interest. For instance, the buyer consulted ILC before signing the joint venture agreement. This means the buyer had their own attorney to review the deal independently. Jumbo loan, which means a mortgage that exceeds conforming loan limits set by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. For example, he needed a jumbo loan to buy the $1.2 million home. This means his loan amount was too large for standard programs and required special terms. Lease, which means a legal agreement giving someone the right to use property for a specified time and payment. For instance, they signed a 1-year lease for the apartment. This means they had the right to live there for 12 months in exchange for rent. Leasehold, which means a type of property ownership where the buyer owns the building but leases the land. For example, the condo was on a leasehold, so the land was not included in the purchase. This means the buyer didn't own the land the unit was built on. Lien, which means a legal claim on a property for unpaid debt. For instance, a contractor placed a lien on the home for unpaid remodeling work. This means the contractor could seek payment through the property's value. Listing agent, which means the real estate agent who represents the seller in a transaction. For example, the listing agent hosted an open house to attract buyers. This means the agent worked for the seller and promoted the property. Listing agreement, which means a contract between a property owner and a real estate agent to sell the property. For instance, they signed a 90-day listing agreement with a local brokerage. This means the agent had exclusive rights to market and sell the home for 90 days. Loan-to-value ratio, LTV, which means the percentage of a property's value that is financed by a loan. For example, a loan of $180,000 on a $200,000 home has a 90% LTV. This means the buyer is borrowing 90% of the home's value.